Shalom, Hamster Garden Suburb Synagogue. Wishing you all Shabbat Shalom and Chag Pesach Kasher V'Sameach. We have a huge Yom Tov coming up. What's the huge Yom Tov? It's a day when we're finally going to be able to come together with other people, to be able to dine together. That's the Yom Tov on the 29th of March. We're going to recite Hallel that morning, we're going to recite Musaf that morning, and then we will jubilantly skip all the way home and head out to our gardens where we will be able to have a meal with another family. Now, what's the name of that Yom Tov again? That Yom Tov occurs this Monday, the 29th of March. What's the name of that Yom Tov? The name is the inaugural day of the Omer. It's the first day that we start counting the Omer. It's a huge day. Back in ancient times, there was a massive celebration. I want to tell you, what does the Rambam say would happen in those days? All of the inhabitants of all of the nearby villages would gather so that the Omer, the barley offering, would be reaped with much fanfare. Once the barley had been offered, all the new grains across the board became permitted for consumption. And that's why the Torah calls Pesach Chag HaAviv, the spring festival, because at that moment we have the ushering in of the spring season. We're going to change the clocks on Sunday, but not until Monday do we have the beginning of the Omer festival, the inaugural first day of counting the Omer. The second thing that happens on that day, of course, when I talk about counting up, is that we start counting towards Shavuot. We left Egypt, but we didn't just leave Egypt to wander. We left Egypt with a purpose in mind. We left Egypt with a goal of receiving the Torah. Each day, beginning Monday, that big Yom Tov, 29th of March, we start counting one day after another day until we reach that pinnacle on the 50th day of the receiving of the Torah. Now, why is it that we count up to the receiving of the Torah? Normally, when you want to look forward to something, you count down the days. I want to share with you two ideas. Idea number one is day one, we're on a certain spiritual level. But the more we go through each of the days of the Omer, we get stronger and stronger spiritually, leaving Egypt behind, strengthening ourselves, ready to receive the Torah. That's reason number one. So the 49th level, the 50th level, perfection, receiving the Torah, is so much greater than the first. Second answer is that, of course, the receiving of the Torah is not the end of the story. We're not counting down to an end. The receiving of the Torah is that moment when we become entrusted with the mission that's going to take us throughout our lifetimes, the sojourn in the wilderness, the entry into the promised land, and for all eternity. So it's a growth period that continues for all generations. So that's why we're counting up, but not stopping at Shavuot, realizing like a bar or bat mitzvah, that this is the beginning of so much that is greater spiritually in our lives. So far we have two aspects of the Omer that begin on Monday, the inaugural day of the Omer. We have the barley offering, and we have the days counting up to Shavuot. I want to share with you a third idea that happens during the Omer. Historically, we note that the students of Rabbi Akiva passed during this period. There was some kind of pandemic, and 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva perished during this time. There was a massive plague, and on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, we have a massive celebration to mark the end of that pandemic. Friends, let's remember these three ideas when we enter the Omer on our big Yom Tov, the 29th of March. Remember, number one, we have our barley offering, huge celebration. Number two, we have the counting up to the Torah. Number three, it's a tragic time because of the pandemic. Right now, we are in the midst of counting up to our big British celebration. Each day, we check the news to see how many more citizens have been vaccinated. With each passing day, we're getting stronger and healthier as a nation. But unfortunately, we've now been told the coronavirus is here with us to stay. While that's sad news, we're nonetheless determined to get our lives back on track and keep everyone as robust as possible. That might require annual jabs, whatever it takes. We're committed to staying on top of our health and prosperity, forever counting onwards and upwards. You can imagine that's how Rabbi Akiva felt. Did the students suddenly stop dying on the 33rd of the Omer? No. Many of us still commemorate the Omer all the way up to Shavuot. But there was a certain point where he says, this is the break point. This is the end of the pandemic. We need a day to mark it and say, that's it. We are done. The pandemic is behind us. And we are now going to start the process of rebuilding. In the UK, we're getting very close to that Lag BaOmer moment. We're getting ready for the day that we declare victory over coronavirus. It won't necessarily mean that life is back to normal. And certainly we have had so many losses along the way. But it will be a day of thanksgiving to Hashem for the miracle of the vaccine and for bringing us out of the house of slavery we have lived in over the last year. On Pesach, we don't celebrate our arrival in the Promised Land. We mark the beginning of our journey to freedom, which started with the Exodus and continued with the process of growth as we made our way to Sinai and then on to the Promised Land. You see, freedom doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. This year, this Monday, the 29th of March, we will celebrate the beginning of the counting of the Omer. We'll know that we're not yet at the Promised Land. We'll know that we're not even yet at Lag BaOmer. But we'll celebrate the start of the journey. Many people would have loved to have seen that day of celebration and inauguration happen in time for the Passover Seders. Tragically, once again, this year, all of the law-abiding citizens of our community will be sitting at our Pesach Seders, forlorn, bereft of other family members. But we will know that just a couple of days later, we will be able to be reunited with our loved ones, with our family and friends. And so this year at the Pesach Seder, let's not dwell on what could have or should have been. Instead, let's do what we need to do on Pesach night, from telling the story to eating the matzah and maror. But let's save some of those fun times, some of the songs, some of the celebrations, some of the stories that we tell every year with our extended family. Let's save those for Omer Day, for Monday, the 29th of March. And we'll sing them together like we have every year. We'll celebrate together as we begin our count towards the future. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Pesach, Kasher v'Sameach, and Chag HaOmer, Kasher v'Sameach.